Imagine someone, let's say a guy who has been meditating every single day for like 10 years.
Oh, yeah, we all know this guy.
Right. I mean, they've downloaded all the apps. They've been to the super expensive silent retreats. They have, the dedicated little velvet cushion in the corner of their bedroom.
Yeah, the whole aesthetic.
Exactly, the
Yeah.
whole aesthetic. Yet, if you cut them off in traffic, they still absolutely lose their minds.
Oh, completely.
They are just as anxious, just as reactive, and honestly, just as exhausted as they were on day one. And it really makes you wonder, why does that happen?
Well, it's because we are constantly bombarded with these buzzwords, right? Words like mindfulness and presence and awareness.
Right, they're everywhere.
They really are. But when you actually look at the modern wellness industry,
Right.
it seems like they are selling a static aesthetic rather than, a functioning mechanical process.
Which is exactly our mission for this deep dive, because
Yeah.
today, for you listening, we are going to bypass all of that superficial wellness fluff entirely.
Yes, thankfully.
Yeah, we're going to examine a precise, totally sequential roadmap of how the mind actually evolves. Our source material today is drawn from a translated transcript of a remarkably in-depth Buddhist teaching. It's titled Investigating the Dhammas.
And I think it's important to set the stage for you right now, because what we're going to explore today treats the mind almost like an intricate physics problem.
Yeah, it's not fuzzy at all. It outlines a really rigorous architecture.
Exactly. The framework presented in this text, it doesn't rely on blind mysticism. It operates on strict cause and effect.
Right.
It outlines this progression where one specific mental quality must act as the catalyst for the next one, moving from something as ordinary as, basic human curiosity all the way to a state where the mind is just irreversibly carried toward liberation.
So let's actually look at that starting point, because it immediately challenges the conventional wisdom. I mean, if you ask a random person on the street what the first step of meditation is, they will probably tell you to sit down, close your eyes, and focus on your breath.
Yeah, the standard advice.
Right. But this text argues that starting with deep concentration is actually skipping several crucial steps.
It's skipping the foundation entirely.
Yeah. The actual engine of growth, the absolute beginning of this entire process, is something we normally associate with, little kids. It starts with simple inquisitiveness.
It does. The text introduces two foundational starting conditions. First is a Pali term, vimamsa, which translates to the inquiring or investigating mind.
Okay, Mamsa.
Right. And the second is chanda, which is the willingness or the genuine liking to do something. And the speaker in the transcript uses this brilliant comparison here to small children.
Oh, I love this part. I really want to spend a moment on this toddler analogy because it fundamentally changed how I view spiritual practice.
It's so relatable.
It really is. Think about a toddler encountering a simple object, like a door hinge, for the first time.
Yeah.
They don't just passively look at it. They have this boundless, almost exhausting drive to understand it.
Right. They point, they pull at it.
Exactly. They constantly ask, what is this? Why does it move like that? What happens if I, jam my finger in it? They are relentlessly interrogating their reality.
And that relentless interrogation is precisely what is required to kickstart any genuine spiritual development.
Yeah.
The text makes a definitive claim here. Without this active investigating part of the mind, the algorithm of mental evolution simply never boots up.
Wow. Never boots up.
Never. I mean, if you are sitting on a cushion just because your doctor told you it lowers your blood pressure, but you aren't genuinely curious about what the experience of your own consciousness actually is, nothing structural will change.
You're just doing a chore.
Exactly. You're just performing a chore.
But that really begs the question then, how do we lose that? If we all start as toddlers interrogating door hinges, why do adults need a centuries-old text to remind them to be curious?
Well, we lose it because we replace investigation with categorization.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
As adults, when we look at a door hinge, our brain immediately slaps a label on it, hinge. And the moment we label it, we stop actually seeing it. And the problem is, we do the exact same thing with our internal experiences.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Right? We feel a tightening in our chest and immediately label it anxiety or stress from work. And we stop investigating the raw, actual sensation of it.
We just file it away.
Exactly. So vimamsa is the deliberate suspension of those automatic labels. It is returning to that raw, unfiltered questioning, what actually is this reality I am experiencing right now?
And if we can recapture that curiosity, the text says it triggers a kind of chain reaction,
It
right?
does.
Because when you start asking those questions, you naturally start seeking out information. You listen, you read, you take part in discussions. And that active engagement builds the first of what the text calls the five indriya.
Or spiritual faculties.
Yeah, faculties. And this first faculty is called sutta,
And this right here is where we run into a major translation issue, because sata is most commonly translated into English as faith or confidence.
which, I mean, immediately sets off alarm bells for a lot of people, myself definitely
Oh,
included.
for sure.
Because when I hear the word faith in a spiritual context, my mind goes straight to blind devotion. I think of, believing in invisible deities without any empirical evidence.
And that is the heavy Western cultural baggage of that word.
Mm.
But the psychological realism of this framework defines sata in an incredibly practical, grounded way.
Okay.
Faith, in this specific context, is not about asking you to believe in the supernatural at all. The text explicitly defines the building of this confidence as the act of temporarily putting aside your personal agenda.
Just putting down your work, your business, your daily stress. So it's a behavioral shift, not a belief system.
Exactly. It is the practical confidence to basically say, I am going to pause my mundane worries, the emails, the mortgage, the imaginary arguments I'm having in the shower so that I can be fully present with this investigation.
Right, because you can't investigate reality if your brain is somewhere else.
You cannot investigate the nature of your reality if 90% of your cognitive bandwidth is currently calculating what you're going to make for dinner.
Yeah.
So esada is just having enough trust in the process of your own curiosity to actually clear the deck and show up for it.
To ground this for you listening, let's pull this out of the meditation hall for a second and look at a major life change.
Okay, I like that.
Imagine you are contemplating moving to a brand new city across the country.
Sure.
The toddler curiosity, the vimamsa, is you wondering, what would my life look like there? What's the weather like? What are the neighborhoods like? You are just sort of exploring the concept.
Right.
But sata, this specific type of confidence, is the moment you stop just casually scrolling through apartment listings on your lunch break. It's the moment you actually commit. You say, I trust that this exploration is worth my actual time. I'm putting my current weekend plans on pause to fly out there and walk the streets.
That's a perfect analogy. And the moment you make that commitment, the moment you pause the endless hum of the daily agenda to focus on the investigation, a massive psychological shift occurs.
Really? Like what?
Well, when sata solidifies, it naturally triggers the second spiritual faculty, which is virya.
Virya, which means mental effort or energy, right?
Yes. Think about the sheer amount of mental energy you expend every single day just maintaining your agenda.
Oh, it's exhausting.
It is. Worrying about the past, projecting into the future, managing your social image. When sata allows you to temporarily put that heavy burden down, all of that tied up cognitive energy is suddenly liberated, and that freed up fuel is virya.
Oh, wow. So going back to the moving analogy, virya is the stage where you're actually packing the boxes, lifting the couch, and, driving the moving truck. You aren't just curious anymore, and you aren't just confident it's a good idea. You have the raw horsepower to execute the work.
Exactly. Notice how logically tight this sequence is.
Yeah, it really is.
Because without curiosity, faith is just blind obedience to a teacher or a tradition. But curiosity without energy, without virya, is just idle armchair philosophizing.
Right. You're just a guy on a couch thinking deep thoughts.
Right. You sit around pondering the nature of the universe, but never actually do the hard work of examining your own mind.
Yeah.
The curiosity creates the confidence, and the confidence generates the raw energy required for the practice.
But wait, if I have just liberated all this cognitive energy, aren't I in danger of just becoming incredibly restless?
Oh, absolutely.
Because if I drop all my daily worries, I feel like I might just have this massive burst of manic energy and end up frantically reorganizing my garage instead of achieving spiritual growth. I mean, raw horsepower without a steering wheel just leads to a crash, right?
That is the exact vulnerability in the system at this stage. Untethered virya just becomes agitation. And that brings us to the crucial regulating mechanism, the third faculty, which is sati.
Sati, which is most commonly translated as mindfulness.
Yes, but this is where the source material radically redefines the pop culture version of mindfulness we've all been sold.
Yeah, the text really goes after the modern idea of mindfulness.
It does. The speaker in the text launches this fascinating critique of modern attention spans to illustrate what true sati actually is. They draw a stark contrast between today's technology-driven distraction and the environment of practitioners in the past.
The smartphone anecdote in the transcript is honestly, it's devastatingly accurate.
It really hits home.
It does. The speaker points out how today a person will get up with the intention to do something specific. Their smartphone will ring, they will answer it, scroll for a minute, and by the time they put the phone down, they have completely forgotten what they originally stood up to do.
Yeah.
Their attention has just been hijacked and shattered.
And the text contrasts that scattered, fragmented modern mind with practitioners in Sri Lanka back in the 1950s.
Oh.
The speaker notes that in those days, many meditation centers didn't even have electricity. They relied on simple kerosene oil lamps in the evenings. Yet from those incredibly sparse, low-tech environments, a profound dedication to developing unbroken mindfulness emerged.
It really highlights how our modern tech environment is almost actively hostile to the faculty of sati.
It is.
I mean, the idea that you need a smartwatch buzzing on your wrist or a sleek app with gamified streaks to develop mindfulness is something the text literally refers to as a kind of joke.
Because true sati cannot be outsourced to a device. It is the internal, practical application of attention to reality. And the text lays out the mechanical training for this. You have to drastically slow down. You do one thing at a time.
Right, the text lists the activities very specifically. It says walking, chewing, swallowing, tasting. It says these daily mundane actions must be done knowingly and with clear comprehension.
So let's examine the mechanics of what clear comprehension actually means, because this is where the training wheels are put on. The physical slowing down is not the ultimate goal. The goal is entirely cognitive. You are training the mind to note reality, simply registering this is happening, without getting tangled in what the text identifies as attachment and conflict.
Meaning, you take a bite of food, you register the sensation of the taste, but you intercept the mind before it generates the thought, this is delicious, I want 3 more portions of this, or this is way too salty, the chef ruined it.
Exactly.
You are just holding the raw data of the experience in your awareness.
You are intercepting craving and aversion. But this physical training phase, the slowing down, is incredibly susceptible to being misunderstood.
Oh, for sure.
The source text includes a brilliant, honestly humorous anecdote to warn practitioners about this exact trap. It involves a monk observing people practicing walking meditation.
Ah, the pottery anecdote.
Yeah.
For you listening, try to visualize a traditional meditation retreat. People are practicing walking meditation, which involves breaking the act of walking down into these highly deliberate slow motion steps. The text describes the mechanics as intentionally lifting, carrying, and stepping.
And a monk in Sri Lanka was watching this. He saw these practitioners doing this exaggerated, mechanical, almost robotic walking, and he joked that they looked like they were treading raw loam and clay to prepare it for making pottery.
Just rigidly smashing clay with their feet.
Exactly.
It paints such an absurd picture, but it highlights a very serious problem with how this is taught.
It does. The speaker uses this to warn against what they call copycat teachers.
Copycat teachers.
Right. These are instructors who read a book about the physical mechanics of mindfulness. They memorize the instructions to lift, carry, step, but they lack the firsthand experiential understanding of why those mechanics exist in the first place.
They are teaching the choreography without the music?
Precisely. They end up instructing people to walk like rigid clay-treading robots. They are performing the physical theater of mindfulness, but they are completely missing the internal development of awareness.
Because the mind is probably still racing while they do it.
Exactly. The entire purpose of slowing the physical body down is to give your internal cognitive processing the necessary space to observe its own rapid-fire reactions. If you were just obsessing over the mechanical angle of your foot, you aren't developing sati. You're just doing weird calisthenics.
Yeah, that makes total sense. But if slowing down is just the training wheels phase, what happens when we actually get the hang of riding the bike? I mean, if I'm successfully using sati to steer my massive energy, my virya, where does the vehicle actually go?
Well, when sati developed to a sufficiently high degree, all that scattered energy coalesces. The mind finally settles. And this acts as the necessary precursor for the 4th and 5th faculties, which are samadhi, meaning concentration, and panna, which is wisdom.
Let's tackle samadhi first, because once again, the source material completely upends the conventional assumptions.
It really does.
When the average person hears the word concentration or deep meditation, they picture a monk sitting as still as a statue, totally zoned out, basically dead to the world around them.
And the text launches a heavy, almost sarcastic critique of this idea. It directly addresses the common misconception that concentration equates to sitting like a rock or entering some foggy, dreamlike state where your sensory input just shuts down.
The comparison the speaker uses is devastating. They point out that if the ultimate goal of spiritual practice is simply to sit like a rock and not feel anything, well, modern medicine has already perfected that.
Right.
You can just go to a hospital, take heavy anesthetics, and sit like a rock for hours.
If the height of spiritual achievement is mere unconsciousness or sensory deprivation, then a patient in a coma is enlightened.
Exact.
But true samadhi, according to this rigorous framework, is the exact opposite of being zoned out or anesthetized.
So how does the text explicitly define it?
It uses these razor-sharp criteria. It states, and I'll quote here, "The object is there, the observer is here, the mind is unagitated, undispersed, one-pointed, and clearly apprehends the chosen object."
Clearly apprehends. That phrasing feels crucial. It's not a hazy fog, it's hyperlucid.
It is the difference between a blurry photograph and a high-definition image.
Right.
The mind is entirely stripped of dullness. It is incredibly sharp, fully present with the object of focus, and completely free from the agitation of jumping to past regrets or future anxieties. The subject and the object are clearly defined and locked together.
Okay.
And it is only within this specific hyperlucid state of samadhi that the final faculty can emerge, panna or wisdom.
Now, let me take a guess here, because every time we encounter an English translation in this text, it carries a lot of baggage.
Yes.
Usually when we call someone wise, we mean they have read a lot of books, they have a lot of intellectual intelligence, or, they give good life advice. But given the mechanics we just discussed, I'm guessing panna has absolutely nothing to do with IQ.
You are entirely correct. The speaker explicitly notes that in different languages, the word for wisdom creates massive confusion. Like in Sinhalese, for instance, the word can sometimes be used to just mean intelligence.
Oh, interesting.
So the text uses a practical example to violently sever the concept of intelligence from the concept of panna. They use the example of building a roof.
Building a roof?
Yeah.
Okay. If you are going to build a complex roof, you need to calculate the weight of the timber, figure out the load-bearing capacity of the pillars, choose the correct angle for the pitch.
Right.
That requires a high degree of intelligence and conceptual knowledge. But the text states unequivocally that calculation is not panna.
Because calculations, concepts, and philosophies are all mediated by the intellect. They are abstractions of reality. Panna, which the text beautifully refers to as the supreme jewelry of humankind, is first-hand, experiential understanding. It cannot be acquired through reading or rationalizing.
To really drive home the difference between intellectual knowledge and experiential panna, for you listening, think about the element of water.
Okay, let's hear it.
I can memorize the chemical formula for water, right? H2O.
Mm-hmm.
I can read advanced physics textbooks about its surface tension, its boiling point, its displacement mass. I can possess immense intellectual intelligence regarding water.
Sure.
But none of that conceptual knowledge is the same thing as the firsthand, undeniable bodily experience of almost drowning in a riptide.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Or the experience of quenching a desperate, parched thirst after 3 days in a desert. One is a concept you hold in your brain. The other is undeniable, lived reality. Panna is the lived reality.
That analogy perfectly isolates the difference. And the text provides us with the specific targets that panna is meant to experience.
Right.
It's not just experiencing anything deeply, it is the deep first-hand experiencing of the 5 aggregates, the 4 elements, and the sense bases.
This is where we hit the heavy philosophical and psychological payload of the text. So let's unpack these, specifically the 4 elements and the sense bases, because understanding this is really the key to the entire framework.
Absolutely. In this framework, the 4 elements, earth, water, fire, and air, are not literal dirt and flames.
Right, it's not Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Right, exactly. They represent the fundamental physical properties of reality. So you have solidity or extension, which is earth, cohesion, which is water, temperature, which is fire, and motion or vibration, which is air.
Okay.
When true wisdom, panna, arises out of deep concentration, you don't just intellectually acknowledge that your body is made of matter. You continuously experience your physical sensations purely as these elements, void of a living entity or own substance.
Okay, let me challenge that phrasing for a second, because saying I need to experience my body as void of a living entity sounds terrifying.
It does sound intimidating.
It sounds like psychological depersonalization or some kind of dissociative disorder where you feel numb and disconnected from your own humanity. How is that a healthy goal?
It is a critical distinction to make. Depersonalization is a trauma response. and it's characterized by dullness, fog, and a fearful feeling of unreality. You feel disconnected from a self that you desperately believe should be there. Panna is the exact opposite of dullness. It is hyper-lucid connection to reality. You are not disconnecting from a self. You are closely examining the raw data of reality and realizing that the static self you thought was there was just an illusion created by rapid thought.
Okay, walk me through the mechanics of that. How does observing temperature and motion break down the illusion of the self?
Imagine you are in deep samadhi, observing a pain in your knee. Normally, the untrained mind experiences that and immediately generates a narrative. My knee hurts, I have bad joints, I hate this pain, I am a person who suffers.
Right. There is a strong sense of a static I being attacked by the pain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But when the hyperfocus lens of Panna examines that exact same area, it doesn't find an eye or a knee. It only finds the raw data, an intense sensation of heat, which is the fire element, and a sensation of pressure or hardness, which is the earth element.
And because you have the steering wheel of mindfulness, Sadie, you aren't reacting to the heat and pressure with anger or fear, you are just observing it.
Yes, and as you observe it closely, you see that the heat and pressure are not static. They are constantly vibrating, rising, and falling away, which is the air element of motion. You experience your reality not as a solid noun, but as a continuous flowing verb.
Wow. A continuous flowing verb.
The text states it explicitly. If you see your experience in terms of the elements, what is there is the interaction of elements where there is no being.
And the psychological relief of that must be immense. I mean, if there is no static being to be injured or offended, a massive portion of human suffering simply evaporates.
It's a profound rewiring of perception, and you apply the exact same process to the sense bases, the eye and sight, the ear and sound.
So instead of the narrative, I am a person listening to a bird, Panna allows you to experience the raw mechanical interaction of sound waves hitting an eardrum, producing a moment of consciousness, and then instantly vanishing.
Yes. This is the culmination of the 5 faculties. You have used the toddler's inquisitiveness vimamsa to generate the confidence sutta to pause your agenda. That pause freed up massive energy virya. You steered that energy with non-reactive mindfulness sati, which allowed the mind to settle into hyper-lucid concentration samadhi. And that concentration became the microscope through which wisdom Panna could finally pierce the illusion of the static self.
It is an incredibly tight logical progression, but here is my concern as a modern person listening to this.
Okay, what is it?
This sounds exhausting.
It does.
I mean, if these are faculties, meaning muscles I have to actively flex, how can anyone possibly maintain this in daily life? I can't walk around like a hyperlucid microscope all day while trying to pay my taxes and raise my kids. Does the system account for burnout?
The system accounts for it beautifully, which actually brings us to a major threshold in the transcript.
Oh, really?
Yes. Up until this point, we have been discussing these 5 qualities as tools we actively deploy. The text refers to them as indriya, or spiritual faculties.
And the transcript notes the linguistic root of that word, which I found fascinating. It comes from Indra, the king of the gods in ancient Indian mythology.
Meaning the main actor or the chief. When these qualities operate as indriya, they are the leading factors in your mind. You are the chief, actively commanding your mind.
Like, I am going to be mindful of this step. I am going to concentrate on this breath.
Right. It requires continuous conscious exertion. But the text reveals that through relentless, continuous development, these faculties cross a critical threshold. They evolve from indriya into bala.
Spiritual powers.
Yes. The text emphasizes that bala is an advanced, fully matured occasion of those exact same 5 qualities. You develop the power of confidence, the power of energy, the power of mindfulness, the power of concentration, and the power of wisdom.
But if they are the exact same 5 qualities, why do they require a totally new categorization? Like, what is the mechanical difference between a faculty and a power?
The difference lies entirely in autonomy and unshakability. A faculty is a muscle you must choose to flex. A power is a force of nature that operates on its own. They transition from being tools you must consciously cultivate to an autonomous baseline of your consciousness.
You know, I think the best way to understand this transition for those listening is to think about acquiring any highly complex skill, like learning a second language as an adult.
Oh, that's good. Explain how that maps onto this framework.
So when you first start learning Spanish, you are in the indriya stage. You are using your faculties, someone speaks to you, and you have to exert intense mental effort. You are actively translating every single word in your head, consciously applying the grammar rules you memorized, and forcing your mouth to make unfamiliar
Oh, it
shapes.
is very manual.
Extremely manual. It requires massive cognitive load, and you can only do it for a little while before you are just totally exhausted. You are the one doing the heavy lifting.
But you don't stay in that phase forever.
No. If you immerse yourself completely for years, eventually you cross the threshold. You stop translating. When someone speaks Spanish to you, you just understand the meaning instantly, the same way you understand English.
Yeah.
You open your mouth, and the correct grammar just flows out without calculation. You even start dreaming in Spanish. The language is no longer a tool you are wielding. It has become an autonomous power, a bala operating within you. You couldn't turn it off if you tried.
That is a flawless analogy for the Bala stage of spiritual development. It becomes effortless. And what is vital to understand about these 5 specific powers is how they form a closed, self-sustaining ecosystem. They do not operate in isolation. They continuously feed each other.
How does that feedback loop actually work in practice?
Well, the power of confident sutta, which is now an absolute, unwavering trust in the process based on firsthand experience, that generates an endless, effortless supply of the power of energy virya.
Okay, so the energy never runs out.
Right. And that continuous energy ensures that the power of mindfulness sati never drops, meaning you never lose your clear comprehension of reality.
Which anchors the concentration.
Exactly. That unbroken mindfulness anchors the power of concentration samadhi, keeping the mind perfectly lucid at all times. And that unshakable concentration allows the power of wisdom padding to continuously, effortlessly pierce through illusions and attachments the very millisecond they begin to form.
So it's essentially an autonomous immune system for your consciousness. It neutralizes unwholesome states like anger, greed, delusion before they can even take root.
It is absolute psychological resilience. And once this immune system is fully operational, once these 5 powers are fully matured, they set the stage for the absolute climax of the source text.
The final frontier. The text introduces the ultimate phase of development, the 7 enlightenment factors, or bojjhanga.
The sequencing here is non-negotiable.
No skipping ahead.
The text is explicit that these enlightenment factors only arise after the spiritual powers are fully developed.
Yeah.
You cannot skip the line. You cannot attend a weekend retreat, bypass the faculties and powers, and just land at enlightenment. The engine must be built, the steering must be perfected, and the components must be upgraded to autonomous powers first.
And the text focuses specifically on one of these enlightenment factors to bring this massive philosophical journey full circle. It highlights the factor known as Dhammavicaya.
Dhammavicaya, which translates to the investigation of phenomena. Do you recognize the root of that?
It's the toddler, the vimamsa, the basic natural inquisitiveness we started with.
Precisely. This is the elegance of the entire framework. When that simple, ordinary inquiring quality of mind is subjected to the intense heat and pressure of confidence, energy, mindfulness, and concentration.
Yeah.
When it is refined by experiential wisdom into an autonomous power, it finally reaches its ultimate perfected peak. It becomes the enlightenment factor of investigation. It is the exact same core quality of curiosity, but infinitely refined and perfected.
It's like coal being compressed over time until it becomes a flawless diamond.
Yes. And when these enlightenment factors become active, the speaker in the transcript introduces a climactic analogy that is, well, it's truly awe-inspiring. They introduce the analogy of the river current.
This is the part of the text that I found the most profound.
It's beautiful.
It really is. The speaker says that once a practitioner reaches this level, the mind turns definitively and permanently toward nibbana, toward ultimate liberation. The text explicitly states it is impossible to turn back to the worldly side.
It represents a permanent structural shift in the physics of a person's consciousness.
Yeah.
The speaker uses the image of a branch falling into a rushing river. If an object falls into a powerful, deep river stream, it is inexorably carried away by the current. It's pushed constantly toward the ocean.
You don't get dragged back onto the bank. You don't suddenly start floating upstream against the current.
No. The text says, once you have fallen into the stream that is getting you towards nibbana, then you are being carried away all the way until you reach it. You just follow the stream all the way down.
You know, let's ground this for a second because this sounds incredibly mystical.
Sure.
What does it actually mean for a normal human being on a Tuesday morning to be in the river current? Does it mean they just stop caring about their job, their family, their mortgage? Do they just sort of float away into apathy?
Not at all. You still chop wood and carry water. You still go to work and care for your family. What changes is the friction.
The friction.
Yes. The Dhammavicaya factor continuously, effortlessly, keeps the mind inclined towards seeing reality as it is, impermanent, vibrating, void of a static self. Because you see reality clearly, the struggle ceases.
Right, because suffering comes from fighting reality.
Exactly. Suffering is generated by clinging, by trying to force reality to be permanent, by trying to swim upstream against the flow of time and decay. When you enter this river, the clinging is just washed away by the sheer force of experiential wisdom. You still act in the world, but you no longer suffer from it.
There is such a profound sense of relief in that analogy. I mean, think about the intense effort required in the early stages we discussed.
Oh, it's a lot of work.
Cultivating faith, intentionally slowing down your walking, noting your chewing, building concentration against the huge tide of modern distraction. It requires so much exertion. You are constantly treading water, trying not to sink back into anxiety or anger.
Right.
But this river analogy promises that eventually all that treading gives way to a natural, irreversible momentum.
Yeah.
The current does the work for you.
It is the ultimate cessation of psychological struggle.
Wow. We have covered an immense amount of ground today. We started with the engine, recognizing that the simple, inquisitive mind of a toddler asking, "What is this?" is the mandatory spark.
And we saw how temporarily pausing our daily agendas builds the confidence needed to unleash a massive reserve of mental energy.
Right. And then we explored the steering wheel. We examined how to develop true mindfulness, not by relying on apps or walking like robotic clay treaders, but by deeply, clearly comprehending our reality without getting entangled in craving or conflict.
That precise steering brought us to the breakthrough. We discovered a concentration that is hyper-lucid, not anesthetized, and used it as a lens for experiential wisdom.
Seeing the raw data of the elements.
Exactly. We saw how investigating the raw data of the elements shatters the illusion of the static self.
We tracked the great upgrade, witnessing those active faculties mature into autonomous, unshakable spiritual powers that form an immune system for the mind.
And finally, we reached the point of no return. We saw that initial ordinary curiosity evolve into an enlightenment factor, plunging the practitioner into an irreversible river current flowing straight toward liberation and the end of struggle.
The most remarkable takeaway from this rigorous architecture, honestly, is that it does not require divine intervention or supernatural belief.
No, not at all.
It all begins with the tool that you, the listener, already possess right now. It begins with the simple willingness to pause, look closely at your immediate reality, and genuinely ask, "What is this?"
It is a phenomenal roadmap.
It really is. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought based on that climactic analogy.
Okay.
The text says that once you fall into the stream of the Enlightenment factors, you are carried away by a current toward liberation, and it is impossible to turn back.
The momentum is absolute.
But psychological currents exist everywhere, not just on the path to liberation. If you examine your daily habits right now, your media consumption, the algorithmic feeds you scroll through, the daily grievances you nurse, the things that consistently trigger your anger or your desires, what river is your mind currently inclined towards?
That is a vital question. Every habit is a current.
And if you don't actively build the faculties to steer yourself, where is that current inevitably taking you?
Something to really think about.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredibly deep dive into the architecture of the mind. It has been a genuinely fascinating journey to unpack, and we hope it gave you some powerful tools to examine your own reality. Until next time, keep investigating.